In the recent spring budget, the UK Chancellor Jeremy Hunt made the case for lowering UK taxes. This week he's raised the prospect of more tax cuts before the next election, likely to be held later this year. Cutting taxes is the centrepiece of the government's economic strategy. The neoliberal idea that cutting taxes brings about growth is discredited. So why would anyone have this strategy? Some people are deluded into hanging onto outdated right-wing economic ideas. But more cynically, it could just be that this is a desperate government trying to buy people off by putting more money in their pockets. So how does Hunt try to justify it? He says that we believe that in a free society, the money you earn doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to you. I actually 100% agree with this, but there's a bit of a tautology here. It depends what you mean by government. A typical definition of government is the group of people with the authority to govern a country or state. Whilst the UK is a democracy and a free society, and I'm very grateful that I live here, there is a massive hierarchical element to UK government. My belief is that the group of people who have the authority are too detached from the ordinary person. For me, the definition of government is us. I believe in radical equality, that everyone by birth is truly equal to every other human being. Thus, government isn't about creating a governing elite, which often it feels like it is. Government is the way in which we collectively pool our resources to organise society in an efficient and just way. Thus, what he is actually saying here is that the money you earn doesn't belong to some elite group of people. It belongs to you because you are the government. But here is where politics come in. If you have a tax-cutting agenda, it's helpful to present the government as something slightly negative, as something that wants to take your money. We talk about tax as a burden. We talk about the taxman as this horrible creature trying to take your money. Tax is simply the collective financing of a decent and civilised society. I think there's a case for totally changing our language around tax, because currently it's far too negative. Although there's no doubt that our government is capable of wasting money, so I'm not just saying that the government should have a blank cheque. I'm saying that we should rethink the language around tax, because for me, it should be seen as a really positive thing. He then goes on to say, and if we want to encourage hard work, we should let people keep as much of their own money as possible. I also agree with this. People who work hard should be able to benefit from the fruits of their labour 100%. When we pool our resources to entrust government with creating the kind of society we want, we should ensure that our money is used in the best way possible, that it's not wasted, and that people should enjoy the fruits of their labour. Absolutely. However, this is where right-wing ideology comes in. We live in a really unequal society. Generally, we can say that the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. Of course, there are exceptions, but for the majority, this is the case. Much of the massive wealth in the UK, and wealth in the UK is 7 times UK GDP. The UK is such a wealthy country. This wealth is passed down from generation to generation. A lot of wealth is no longer earned by hard work. So I think there's a legitimate question around whether we all as a society are contributing enough to create a fair economy. So while I agree with this statement, I don't think that the priority should be cutting taxes in order that people can keep as much of their own money as possible. That's the wrong starting point. For me, the starting point should be that everyone should have a minimum standard of living and access to all basic services. We should pool our resources to do this in the most efficient way possible so that people can enjoy their own money as much as possible. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm totally against tax cuts for the rich when we have such high poverty and inequality in the UK. So here's where I think Hunt starts to go completely wrong. We look around the world at economies in North America and Asia and notice that countries with lower taxes generally have higher growth. A couple of months ago, I did a video on UK tax and spending policy. I pointed out that there's now strong evidence that tax cuts don't have any significant effect on economic growth, but that they do lead to higher income inequality. Major credible studies by experts at the London School of Economics and the US Congressional Budget Office provide really strong evidence. So when Hunt says that countries with lower taxes generally have higher growth, he's making a claim that flies in the face of the actual evidence that exists. Earlier this year, Hunt made similar claims on the Conservative Home website. He said that he asked his officials to analyse the correlation between taxes and growth. He said that the answer came back clearly. Lower taxed economies have seen higher growth and higher taxed economies lower growth. And he concludes that tax cuts are the only path to a sustainably higher growth economy. Press reports suggest that Hunt was being dishonest. Bloomberg reported that officials told the Prime Minister's team that tax cuts have a low impact on growth back in 2022. I've done a search and I can't find any record of the evidence that Hunt is quoting here. Given this, 2 months after that Conservative Home website article, it's interesting to see that Hunt was more careful with his language in his spring budget speech. Rather than repeating the incorrect statement he made back in January, he said that economists argue about cause and correlation. In other words, the economists told me that there was no correlation between tax cuts and growth, so I actually can't say that anymore. I'll say something more vague like economists disagree. And then he falls back on nothing more than an assertion that lower taxed economies have more energy, dynamism and more innovation. This is pathetic. It's gaslighting. It's dishonest. Given the evidence is that tax cuts make the rich richer, it looks like the government is a group of rich people trying to keep their rich friends rich. He concludes this statement in relation to tax cuts with, "We know that this is Britain's future too, making our system simpler and fairer." If the evidence is that the biggest effect of tax cuts is to make the rich richer, how is this simpler and fairer? Just another example of gaslighting, I'm afraid. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd be really grateful for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.